Welcome back to the 27. Today we'll be going over the newly released BT46B, a very unique and novel introduction to the Formula Retro series and the primary competitor to the Lotus 79 now. We'll be talking about the driving characteristics, the driving style quirks, so to speak, but more importantly, we'll be digging into the telemetry to see if Rise's implementation of the blown diffuser downforce is true to the car's real-life reputation, and of course, comparing it directly to the Lotus 79, so stick around. To put it into historical context, the BT46B was Brabham's answer to the Lotus 79 during the ground effects era in F1. This is well documented. The Lotus 79 used skirts and channeled air under the car, creating about 15 to 20% extra downforce. And according to my analysis of the Lotus, this is roughly recreated in AMS2. The Brabham, on the other hand, literally sealed the entire underbody of the car and hooked a fan to the gearbox to create a vacuum. It was so successful that, according to the car designer Gordon Murray, standing still at high RPM, the car could generate equal amounts of downforce as it did going 180 miles per hour. Imagine that. In real life, they sandbagged the crap out of it, and because it was only entered in one race, we don't know that much about it. It was a flash in the pan. We actually don't know what the car was capable of, besides winning the 1978 Swedish GP by 30 seconds. So how do you represent something like this in a sim and still keep it somewhat fair for the other vehicles? Well, Rise used the physics of a blown diffuser to sort of supplant this unique vacuum effect. A blown diffuser is actually quite simple. It uses the car's exhaust system to encourage airflow, creating extra ground effects downforce at the rear of the car. It also links the downforce effect to RPM in its own way, which is kind of true to the BT46B, so that was encouraging. As far as driving the car is concerned, it's kind of pleasant when you're driving well within its limits, like strolling around. In this situation, it likes a smooth, calm driving style, but what I found was that the more I pushed it, the BT46B sort of became bipolar. After trying it out on my own, it drives very much differently than the Lotus. I tried to keep in mind the RPM and keep the revs as high as possible, but what I found was the car simply didn't appreciate shifting mid-corner, and under trail braking, the RPM drop while shifting affected the downforce, and the car would get out of shape. I was 2 seconds off the pace at Jacarepagua compared to the Lotus. That bummed me out. It's hard to explain, but in my hands, and as simply as possible, while hot lapping, the car had too much oversteer on entry, that transitioned to understeer mid-corner, that transitioned again to oversteer on exit, and any throttle management on its own created understeer, and then oversteer complications. So, depending on the circumstances. In the hands of an alien who has superior car handling abilities, that's one thing. In the hands of a novice like me, it's problematic. Moreover, I definitely felt the car stabilize when under throttle, which I'd like to assume was because of the RPM increase and therefore the downforce. But I could not distinguish this from the typical stabilization that would occur when locking the differential. In fact, I felt the car lacked rear downforce. And many a practice hot lap, I found myself drifting through corners while trying to catch an oversteer. I honestly expected the opposite. It led me to be tentative and skittish. Although faster than the Lotus lap time-wise, I didn't feel as fast as I did with the Lotus. Once I figured out the throttle blip with the Lotus, it started to do what I wanted it to. With the BT46B, it simply seemed to not like anything I did, and when I didn't, or aggravated, and when I didn't do anything, it didn't like that either. Throttling through the corner helps, but it would still get happy in the rear. Perhaps Jacarepagua, with its double apex corners, didn't do me any favors. That being said, I think we can find a way with the setup to be more comfortable. The BT46B has a very high ceiling, so let's jump into the telemetry to see what's going on with this thing and try to diagnose its issues and propose some possible solutions. Alright, here we are with Racing Sim Tools. We're going to diagnose the BT, line it up against the Lotus 79, and a little bit about the Retro Gen 2, which are all listed here. And you can see that I was able to extract maybe, 2 to 3 tenths more out of the BT46B than I was with the Lotus. A little bit underperforming, but for reasons. I did not feel comfortable with this car at all. So we're going to look at, let me think, where should we start? How about let's talk about the aero, which is the biggest question here. And so we're looking at the top graph here. This is the downforce and axle load efficiency. The red line representing the front axle, the blue line representing the rear axle. And you can see that as the The BT46B increases speed, so does the downforce. But let's compare this right now with the Lotus. And we're going to click on over, and you can see that the Lotus loses out to the BT46B at max speed. So I was at max speed at 292 here with the Lotus, and I peaked at 7,800 newtons. 294 with the BT46B, peaking out at 8,100 newtons. So that's an increase in downforce, obviously at top speed. But here's the thing that was concerning to me. So it's not necessarily the top speed downforce that we're looking for. We're looking for medium and high speed cornering speeds. So you're looking at Jacarepagua, that really long high speed corner after the back straight, and you can see here's the Lotus downforce. The blue line, pay attention to that. That's the, I'm sorry, this is the BT46B. We're paying attention to this one, and then we're going to switch it to the Lotus 79. And the Lotus 79 actually has more downforce on corner entry, and that was surprising to me. I actually felt this with the BT46B. Now, at higher speeds, the BT46B has more downforce potential in the rear. But it appears that on corner entry and mid-corner, the Lotus is superior, if not equal, to the BT46B. Now, this was confusing to me when I saw this, because I appreciated that the downforce was linked to the RPM. So let's do a little bit more in-depth analysis. Let's look back at the curvy, swervy parts of Jacarepagua. These little peaks here, down here, are the top ends of the gears. So these little dips, if you can see this, that means I'm shifting. So this is max RPM here. So with the BT46B, you would imagine increases in downforce and having that higher relative to the others. Now here you can see the Lotus 79, this gradual increase. Let's look at the BT46B. There's no real gradual increase based on the RPM. In fact, it looks like under 200 kilometers per hour, the BT46B loses to the Lotus 79. It only makes it up later at the high speed stuff. Wow, that was interesting to me. The next thing we're going to look at is the ride height. This might be a complicating factor. The ride heights for all of the retro cars are generally quite poor. I think they bottom out a lot, and it's especially with the BT46B. Although the rake seems to be on point, all these times these green and yellow bars are reaching the bottom of the graph. That means they're at or bottoming out. So that's problematic. It happens with all of the retros, but especially with the BT46B. All right, so let's move into the next factor of analysis. Why is the BT46B losing to aero? And it doesn't appear to have as much aero as the Lotus in some spots. And one of the reasons, I think, is because of the ride height, but more importantly, the suspension is highly soft. If you're looking here, we're looking at the pitch and roll gradient graph. I don't show this much because it's not really that interesting. Over here in the red is the front roll gradient. This is how many degrees the car twists, kind of, or rolls. And here's the rear, and then over here it's the pitch. So when you hit the brakes, it pitches forward. When you hit the gas, it pitches rearward. Generally speaking, these look fine as far as numbers are concerned, but they're way higher than the recommended amounts, and that's the Lotus. Now look at the BT46B. The roll gradient is higher than you would expect than in a GT3 car. So let's put that in the frame of mind. Higher roll gradient in a GT3 car with an aero-dependent F1 vehicle, which are typically in like the 0.2 range, as what you would expect. That is extremely problematic. And you can see here also, we're switching to the lateral stiffness distribution page. Generally speaking, the car is very, very much balanced to the understeer side of things. But look at the roll in degrees. You're looking at, 1.6 roll degrees. It's a lot less with the Lotus. The Lotus and the Formula Retro Gen 2 are very similar with roll, but the BT46B is rolling very heavily. Now, I don't know how that affects the diffuser, or the blown diffuser, which should just augment the diffuser itself. But it leads to this amount of instability in the corners. So look at this, I'm looking at the Handling tab now, the stability at the top. and we're going to take a look at the Lotus and the Formula Retro Gen 2. And you can see that, you know, it peaks above 20% yaw occasionally with the Retro Gen 2. Generally stays below 20% with the Lotus. Take a look at the BT46B. Boom. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 instances of over 20 degrees in yaw. That's not a pleasant driving experience. I tell you that much right now. Let's go back to the lateral stiffness distribution page. We're going to be looking at the NSC graph here. I don't use this much either, and there's reasons for that, because the parameters are a little bit shady with RST when it comes to the NSC. With regards to AMS2, I should say, it's not a problem with RST. But it does give you a good ballpark figure. This graph basically is trying to determine what your wheel inputs are. So if you're understeering, it'll be in the negative. If you're oversteering, it's in the negative. If you're understeering, it's in the positive. And generally speaking, you want to keep it as close to the zero line as possible. So let's go through these cars. Let's actually just look at the Lotus 79. So you can see that there's some understeer and then oversteer and then understeer, all in the span of about you know, one corner, and that's fine. You're trying to find the max grip point of the rears and the max grip point of the fronts. It's not uncommon, but the degree is the problematic factor here. And here we have understeer and then oversteer severe compared to the Lotus, and every degree matters here. So that's more wheel inputs that you have to put in to control the car. This leads to highly uncomfortable driving and probably decreased lap times. If you look at the Lotus at the end of the lap here, it was, you know, generally okay within 2 degrees. But look at the BT, oh my God, up and down, even in like the middle of a corner. So that's exactly how the car represents on the track. Let's go through a couple more things here. The run tab here. We're looking at the cambers. The BT46B is generally over cambered on both the fronts and the rears. The pressures on the rears look okay. It's under pressured in the fronts. That could, you know, complicate some things. You want to balance those out. So I'd recommend bringing up the pressures a little bit on the fronts. But let's look at the total grip page and compare it to the Lotus. See, now we have 1.95 G total grip throughout the course of the lap with the BT46B, but look at the wear, 12% on the front right. Good Lord. And that's after 3 laps. Compare that to the Lotus. We lose grip with the Lotus, but look at how the grip is, the wear is. It's half as much grip. This means that the BT46B is sliding around for some reason, and that's even with this aero, you know, even with the rear aero. So it's really just a strange car in my hands. You'd expect it to have a lot more stability and bite, but if it's losing aero to the Lotus 79 in low speed stuff, you know, right around here, you know, and you're trying to corner and it has less aero than the Lotus, of course it's going to slide a little bit more. Of course you're going to get more wear with the tires. Finally, let's go through the driver evaluation tab, and this is actually kind of interesting and shocking. I was faster than the Lotus, but you know, you look at the end of the lap, I don't have deltas between cars. So let's look at the time slip graph real quick. Okay, so here, this red line at the bottom, and you can see that the 2 laps are superimposed. The blue is the BT46B, the red is the Lotus. And you can see here that the Lotus, actually, I was faster with the Lotus throughout the entire lap. Much faster in some spots. But then at the very last corner, I was able to, you know, get the BT46B around faster. So yeah, lack of comfort, lack of stability, the understeering to oversteer and back and forth, complicating everything. Not a comfortable driving experience for me. I hope you find it different. The recommended changes, I would definitely stiffen up the package completely. I would increase the spring stiffness on the fronts and the backs in equal measure, maybe a little bit more in the front. I would also definitely increase the ARB stiffness. Those are the first two primary fixes. I want to see what this car is like when it's stiff. I want to see what this car is like when it's an F1 car, not when it's roly-poly like a GT4. So after fixing that, I am hoping that the aero and especially the ride height resolve themselves a little bit better, and then from there we can go with, you know, mechanical balance kind of things to try to tweak things, and then also look into the dampers, which are extremely soft with the BT46B, and then also the you know, the differential. Maybe we can, you know, tweak the differential here, because these cars are very locked, but you don't want too much instability going around corners too, because that'll unlock when you don't want it to. Creates a lot of problems. So that's AMS2's version of the BT46B. With some work, it could be a real beaut. Coming up, we have the Mercedes AMG at Bathurst. Then we'll have a custom default analysis for the Porsche Cup 3.8 next Saturday. Please remember to click all the clickety-clicks. Oh, I wanted to let you know that the administrators of Automobilista Italia are organizing a live commentated European Championship on Twitch. They are currently holding open qualifications. There is buy-in and prizes to the top finishers. If you think you're fast enough, I encourage you to participate, or if you're like me, watch it. Details are in the description below. If you love AMS2, they really need your support. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and take care.